We are going to do two things today. We're going to give you an update on where we are with the investigations. We're going to give you an update on some arrests, on some warrants, and we're going to give you an update on some additional suspects. We're going to continue to call on our community for information. Commander Olvera is going to give you the briefing, and he's going to give you some interesting information also about how many tips that have flooded into the Albuquerque Police Department from our community. And then we are going to introduce you to another group of business leaders led by Steve Maestas from Maestas Ward, who called me last Friday afternoon and said, listen, there's more business people in this community that want to stand shoulder to shoulder with the citizens of Albuquerque and say, we're not going to stand for this. Once again, I always want to start by saying, we live in a country that's free. We have a First Amendment, we have a Constitution, and we want to make sure that people in the city of Albuquerque feel free to come and voice their opinions, whether their opinions for or against a candidate, whether they're supporting a candidate or they have a concern with a candidate, whether it's concerning politics at all or if it's just another issue in our city. We want you to feel safe in your community to be able to let your voice ring loud. What we don't want and what we're not going to stand for is a few individuals who ruin that for everybody by perpetrating violence and using a protest as an excuse to attack our police officers, our police horses, community members, and property, either public or private. So I'm going to start off today with Commander Olvera, and he will give you some details, and then we're going to have Steve Maestas come up and tell you about some additional reward money that's being put forward by a large group of business people in our community. Commander.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Donovan Olvera, the commander for the Albuquerque Police Department Valley Area Command. This weekend, detectives worked endlessly in trying to identify these individuals and have good criminal elements to put them and attach them and tie them onto these criminal acts that were being conducted. We were able to write up 4 warrants this week. The first individual that was arrested was Mr. Julian Heckman, 22 years old. He was arrested on Tuesday. He was identified through the media coverage and through the assistance of everyone calling in on the tips. We also arrested Marcus Griego. He's the 14-year-old along with his parents who turned himself in yesterday with his attorneys present. We are working hard with Mr. Griego and his family to not only show him that his acts were wrong, but I feel and the department feels that he's young enough to learn that what he did was wrong, and our goal is to lead him to the right path in hopes of bettering himself, still facing the consequences of what he did, but better understanding the roles of the police department and the community and the impact that his actions made amongst everyone. So we're hopeful that we can make this and turn this into a positive outcome with Mr. Griego. Just recently, within the last half hour, we had another individual, Mr. Willie Williams, who faces multiple charges. He is also known to have a violent criminal background, to include a homicide back in 1997. Though we don't know if charges were ever pursued at that point, but he does have a criminal background. He is facing 8 felony charges. He was the individual that was seen throwing guardrails at the officers at the time. So detectives did a great job in apprehending the individual, and this was a multi-jurisdictional issue where the FBI and Valencia County and Special Investigations all worked together to apprehend this individual. We still have one outstanding individual that we're looking for. He also faces felony charges. He was caught on camera jumping on cars, throwing rocks, and hitting officers with those rocks. He faces aggravated battery on peace officers as well as aggravated assault on peace officers. And he's also facing criminal damage to property totaling in excess of $13,000. We're not done. Detectives are still currently working to identify more through the tips that you all are providing to us. And we will continue working those tips. So I encourage the community to engage themselves. If you know of anyone, please contact 242 Cops. We are doing everything possible to identify and make sure that these individuals face those consequences that they did. And again, we're still looking at several leads, and we want to thank the community for their help, because without y'all, we would not. This just would not be possible. I know that we've received over hundreds of tips, not only through social media, but through our PIO office and through 242 Cops. So again, we can't thank you enough, and please continue assisting us in apprehending anyone or identifying anyone else who may also be involved in these acts.
Commander, this is a new picture that they haven't seen before. Will you address this and explain to people what's going on?
Yes, sir. So the individual that we are looking at is this individual. This is just one of several other video captures that we have him lighting items on fire and throwing them either at the building or at officers. So we are working endlessly in trying to identify him. We are asking for the public's assistance. If you know who this individual is, please help us out, because you never know. This could be an individual whose next target may be a family business, and the quicker we bring him in and he deals for his actions, the quicker that the better that the community can be and feel safe that this individual will not be committing these acts anymore.
Thanks,
That's all I have.
Appreciate it. Commander Olvera and Chief will be available for questions as well as myself. What I'd like to do now is bring up Steve Maestas from Maestas Ward and speak to the business community's contributions to this effort, additional contributions to this effort. And I'm just going to reiterate this. This is a coming together of our community to say that, once again, Albuquerque is a place where your voice can be heard, but Albuquerque is not a place where we're going to stand for illegal activity. We're not going to stand for violence against our police officers. We're not going to stand for criminal acts and vandalism against our small businesses and our families in the city of Albuquerque. So, Steve, why don't you come up, and I'll have Steve brief you on the phone call that we had last week and his efforts to add to our reward fund. Steve, thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning. Well, let me first begin by thanking the mayor, his office, the entire police force, Chief Eden, for their tireless efforts in apprehending and pursuing the criminals that were involved in the Tuesday evening, May 24th events. Really, this is about two things. This is certainly about bringing swift and just response to those criminal activities, but it's also about the business community and citizens stepping forward and protecting and defending this place that we call home, this place that we choose to live in. There has been great support through our business community. Companies like Wells Fargo, U.S. Bank, HB Construction, Janes Corporation, Giltmore, the Maestas companies. There's been a lot of companies that have stepped forward, and individuals, to increase the monetary rewards for apprehending these criminals. We've collected or raised $12,000 since last week, and I think it's a strong statement about what we care about. And I think the protesters that were peaceful also want justice for the individual, for the acts that were created by the unjust and unlawful protesters. So it's one thing about bringing the criminals to justice, but it's also about coalescing this community and moving forward in a way that is positive with a difficult situation. It's about working together as a community, even though we have disagreement. And at the end of the day, it's about protecting this place that we feel is so important to our kids, our families, and it's about protecting Albuquerque and New Mexico. So I would just like to say thank you again to the business community, thank you to the mayor's office, and thank you to the law enforcement professionals that are continuing to work in this effort. We're going to continue to stand by the effort to raise funds, to increase the reward, and to do whatever we can to communicate that we do care and will care for this community as we move forward. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Steve, thank you so much. That puts our reward fund over $20,000 at this point in time. And that is a reward fund that is set up for information that leads to the arrest and conviction of those responsible for violence and property damage. It's up to $1,000 per individual that is arrested. So we've had multiple tips. So our police department will be working with those people that are sending tips in to make sure that if the criteria are met, that those rewards are put forward. So once again, thanks everybody that's here. Thanks to the business community. And let me just say this is a great community. I mean, I know, and I say this often, I know hundreds of mayors around the country at this point. I've been your mayor for 7 years. I'm on the leadership team with the U.S. Conference of Mayors. I was the head of the Republican Mayors Caucus nationally for 2 years. I know a lot of mayors, and there's a lot of nice towns in America, but nobody has anything on Albuquerque, New Mexico. We have a beautiful community full of beautiful people that are willing to come together and step forward when it's time to do the right thing. And so once again, I want to thank everybody. I also want to commend Commander Olvera and Chief Eden. This idea about reaching out to this juvenile that came in and turned themselves in yesterday, and understanding that this is a young man who is, what would you say, 14 years old. We have an opportunity here as well. We're going to go after those who perpetrated the violence. But if we have an opportunity through this process to help a young man get on the right path and help him, get him some coaching and work with his family to have a positive impact on his life, that's leadership, and I appreciate it, Chief Eden. I appreciate it, Commander Olvera. And I don't know what the outcome will be, but the fact that you have reached out to the family with that, I think that speaks volumes as well. We'd be happy to take questions. Steve, do you want to say anything first?
No, sir.
We'd be happy to take questions.
Has any of the reward money been distributed yet?
Not at this point, because it has to lead to a conviction, and so that process does take some time. I've instructed the department to work with the tipsters to make sure that people know that these rewards are for real, and that they get distributed appropriately. But it's a little early for that, but we'll make it, a quick process so that people know. When you put a reward forward, you want people to know that it's there for a reason, and it will be used.
Mr. Mayor, do you anticipate any more arrests in the coming days?
Yes.
Do you know how many?
I don't. And look, when I talk to the police department, I tell them, as your mayor, let's keep the community informed. Go do your work. I'm not gonna, as a mayor, get into specifics of how they go about their work, because I'm not a public safety professional. So I will let them go at their pace. In fact, I think Commander Olvera told you that the one individual was arrested within the last half an hour.
Yes, sir.
That was, so I walked in today not knowing that arrest had been made, because my briefing was an hour ago. All right, so we'll let the police do their work, and we will stay out of their way as they do their work, but we'll also make sure that they have the support system behind them, and that they know, and that our officers particularly know, that their community stands behind them. If you're standing out there as a police officer, you're getting pelted with rocks, you need a strong message from both your mayor, your chief, and your community, that your community is behind you. And the fact that our officers kept their calm, they had a plan, they stuck with the plan, they were resilient, they were restrained, they took the level of police action that they needed at the time. They certainly had more capability than they used that evening, but as Chief tells me, they didn't feel like it got to the point where they needed to do that. That's a professional and responsible police department that can stand there and do that. But we never want to forget that we want our officers to know that we've got their back as well.
Mayor, do you think Donald Trump should come back and campaign in Albuquerque in the general election?
Boy, you're asking the wrong guy. But Mr. Trump, candidate Trump, Secretary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, Gary Johnson, whoever wants to campaign for any office is welcome to do it in our city. I mean, this is, we just had Memorial Day, and we just got to give another family, the McClintock family, a brick and a quilt with their son's name on it. And he died, giving us the right, and the protesters the right, to support the candidate of our choice, and to protest the candidate of our choice, and to vote as we see fit. So we don't want to do anything that would prohibit any candidate or anybody in our community from voicing their opinion. And so any candidate that wants to come back is welcome in our beautiful city.
Will there be anything different in anticipation? I know you had a task force looking at what could be done differently. Is there anything different that you might anticipate?
Yeah, I think what's important, I can let Chief talk about this, but the briefings that I've received lead me to believe that every situation's different. So the plan that was put into place for this particular event is different than the plan that was put in for the one before, and it'll be different than the one after. So what people need to understand is the police department sits down, they work through scenarios, they do a risk assessment, they bring the resources that they feel will be necessary for that. They have an agility built into that, where, you know, there's officers with emergency response gear, there's officers that have the gear that didn't wear it, there's officers that did wear it. Next time, there may be arrests on the spot. This time, they didn't feel like that was warranted, or that the officers could do that safely because people were, you know, they'd have to go into the crowd to get people. Well, we're holding those people accountable. So I think what people need to realize is that there's no two events that are the same. And I know that Chief has told me in no uncertain terms, they will do an after-action plan. They'll look at the situation. Even if you know, and I don't want to trivialize this by making a sports analogy, but even when you win the game, you can watch game film and do something better next time, right? Well, I'm not saying, I don't want to, you know, say win the game when it comes to a protest. That's not the point. But every professional organization, whether it's a sports team, whether it's a large American or international corporation, you know, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, whoever, you do something, if you have a good outcome, you don't sit on your hands and just rely on that. You look at things you could do better. I know Chief's doing that. And I think this department continues to grow day in and day out, and they've got a new policy in place, and they're using that policy, and so we're proud of their efforts.
I know Marcus Grego's father had called our newsroom shortly after he released the initial photo of
Right.
him, saying that his son did nothing wrong and demanded that we stop showing the picture. So obviously that's changed because he turned himself in. Did you guys have to show his parents?
I can't answer that because I don't get involved in the specifics. Is that something we can even speak to, Commander, or how do you want to address that?
Right now, the criminal element, the probable cause was met. We had enough to charge him. He'll have his day in court, and everything will be brought up to where his parents can also see it.
Okay, so you just didn't have to like show him?
No,
and
ma'am.
his friends or anything?
No, ma'am.
Mayor, could you elaborate for us just a little more on maybe why or how the reward amount has reached the amount that it is? It's quite a bit, and if you think that amount will grow?
Well, listen, we started off with a $10,000 reward at last week's press conference. We talked about the fact that this is important to us as a community, and we want to reward people that are willing to come forward. And a few days later, we had 3 businesses step forward. I've been on the phone with the Chamber of Commerce and their group. They're very participatory in this as well. NAOP is here, another great local business group. Any other business groups? I know we've got small businesses here, but now we've had over 20 local businesses of all kinds. You know, there's construction companies, there's real estate companies, there's banks stepping forward just to say, look, collectively, we believe in our place, and we'll continue to speak loudly and clearly with both our, with our actions and with our dollars to let our officers know that, number one, they're being supported, number two, that this is not a place where we're going to stand by and let a few individuals infringe upon everybody else's capabilities to speak their opinion in a safe and effective manner. So whether there'll be more or not, I don't know, but the fact that we've gotten to this point, I think, speaks volumes. And then I'll just end on this because it looks like we're kind of winding down here. We're the first department in the United States to have all of our officers with lapel cameras. We started this in my first term, and there's been a tremendous learning curve with that. It was the right thing to do, but we were the early adopter. We were the first. And we were ahead of some of the technology at the time. We were ahead of some of the policy at the time. And we've had to work through this as a city, and this is not me as your mayor, but the department has had to work through proper and effective use of lapel cameras. And we've come a long way, and we're truly a national leader in this. But what you're seeing through this effort here is another positive benefit of those lapel cameras. And if people want to come to a protest and they want to commit violent acts, they just need to understand 2 things. Our officers are wearing cameras for several reasons. One is for your protection and to make sure that we are putting forward effective and constitutional policing and to hold those police officers accountable. if they do something wrong. But make no mistake, those cameras were also being used now to hold accountable those in our community who chose to commit violence against our officers in our community. And the second thing is, the protesters that came down and did their work in a peaceful way, guess what? They've got these too. So the days of you coming down, whether you got a mask on, you saw the one picture of the guy with the mask on, he was arrested a half an hour ago. So you choose to come down with the mask on, that's your prerogative, it's America. But just know that the peaceful protesters, that the police department and others, you're gonna be on film. So just know that. And our call to the community is let's come together. Like I say, whether we agree or disagree on the issues, let's come together and let's just make sure that we do this peacefully within the bounds of the law, within the bounds of the Constitution. And the men and women of the Albuquerque Police Department are here to protect your right to do either, and they'll continue to do that.